Hey guys, Liquid here, and welcome to the follow-up to my previous video, which was talking about how I had seen Spider-Man Homecoming. This time we're going to be talking about how I finally watched Spider-Man Far From Home, which I would like to say means that I have watched all the MCU Spider-Man movies, but, technically I am aware Spider-Man does appear in other MCU movies, at least to my knowledge, Spider-Man or Captain America: Civil War, I believe. So technically, I'm still behind, but oh well. But yeah, Far From Home. Honestly, I gotta say, I quite enjoy this one, and seeing it in a lot of ways, I feel has helped contextualize Homecoming in such a way to where I'm not as a lot of my criticisms or problems with Homecoming are sort of resolved in Far From Home. So I just going right into it. The very first thing in this movie is a scene featuring "I Will Always Love You" by Whitney Houston. And I gotta say, I honestly I lulled. It was such a weird, absurd thing. But when the screen came on saying, when the words in memoriam appeared, at first, my first thought was that this was like a tribute to Stan Lee, who I think passed away the year before the movie came out. But then we see, Tony Stark and a bunch of other characters. So, even though, I have not really paid much attention to the MCU, I am, there are a lot of plot details that you just can't really help but avoid. I wasn't aware that it was called the Blip, as they call it in this movie, but I was aware that Thanos, I guess, snaps his fingers and kills a bunch of people and stuff. And I was aware of certain character deaths and whatnot. And so seeing, I guess, Peter having to cope with, I guess, the loss of Tony Stark and whatnot, in a way. So here's the thing, right? At some point in the past, I remember seeing like a tweet or like article or something where Tom Holland basically had said, oh man, Iron Man is the new Uncle Ben for this Spider-Man. And I remember saying that, this is before I had watched any of the movies. And I just remember kind of rolling my eyes. Like, it just seemed like a very weird thing to say. But actually seeing this movie now, I do gotta say it kind of does make sense in context, because as far as I'm aware, Uncle Ben is not ever really directly mentioned in the MCU. Like, doing some digging around, it seems that he might have been mentioned in like an episode of What If or whatever, which I'm honestly not entirely sure what. Like, I'm aware of like the idea of like what the What If comics and What If mode, but I'm not entirely sure what like the whole, like, is that canon? Like, I'm not entirely sure what the context of Uncle Ben being mentioned in What If is, but my headcanon basically is that Uncle Ben does not exist in the MCU, and so losing Uncle Ben is basically what kind of triggers Peter to transform from, the human spider, as he was in the Raimi trilogy, into the actual Spider-Man. And so what we're seeing in Homecoming is the human spider who's, not quite there as a superhero yet, which kind of does help contextualize my negative feelings towards Homecoming, which was, that like he didn't really feel it didn't really feel like a Spider-Man movie as much as like it felt like an MCU movie with Spider-Man, if that makes sense. But yeah, like I I did I guess appreciate the sort of like his relationship with Tony Stark and whatnot in this movie, and so as for Mysterio, I must say that in recent years, I have really kind of developed a sort of fondness for Mysterio. Not really, maybe not fondness exactly, but like I guess a curiosity or an intrigue, because all the sort of illusion stuff really does give him just the opportunity to just, the writers can be very imaginative and creative, when working with him. And so, I thought it was kind of funny, at first, he kind of introduces himself as like being some helper from another world or whatever, and I was kind of thinking like this is like Trunks from Dragon Ball Z, and then we kind of learned that he's actually some sort of like angry, bitter, Stark scientist and whatnot, which is kind of interesting. And one interesting fact that I learned is that the Stark scientist that kind of teams up with Mysterio, the one that I think Jeff Bridges, yells at in the first Iron Man movie. That scientist is actually played by Peter Billingsley, if I've said that right, who was Ralphie in A Christmas Story, the classic Christmas movie from back in the 1980s, which was kind of a big mind-blowing moment for me. Yeah, I did enjoy Mysterio in this movie. I thought Jake Gyllenhaal did a good job, and I really do. I haven't really seen like a Jake Gyllenhaal movie in a while, but like, back in like the 2000s, I did enjoy a lot of his movies. I think it's kind of, I'm not entirely sure what the general consensus on it is, but I really like that Day After Tomorrow movie from like back in 2004 or so. I thought he was good in that. As for other characters, I gotta say, right, compared to MJ and Liz from the previous movie, I kind of prefer Liz. Like I kind of just like wish that Peter just stuck with Liz, but I do think by the end, MJ and Peter's their chemistry does get kind of cute. And back to Mysterio, I was kind of thinking, if his whole sort of shtick is that like he's the master of illusion, and that like everything that he kind of all of his kind of offensive abilities are basically hallucinations, illusions. They're not real. They're just kind of tricking his enemies and whatnot. And I gotta say that there's like a split second where like he like makes Peter see like a zombie Iron Man, which was kind of freaky. But I kind of wonder like in certain it makes me wonder about stuff like back in the Spider-Man PS1 game, when you're fighting Mysterio and he goes giant. Like, is that just like the writers kind of messing up, or like, are we supposed to believe that he really got giant, or that's an illusion somehow? Like, it makes me kind of wonder, like, just like the whole fabric of everything I've seen Mysterio in. There was a brief bit where Peter gets like locked in a Dutch jail. And like you can kind of hear the prisoners speak a little bit of Dutch occasionally, which while I've kind of just ignored it for quite a while, like some people might know back like way back in the day, I used to kind of I was dabbling in kind of studying Dutch a little bit, so it was kind of nice to hear. And of course, a big thing with this one was towards the end, you do get to see J.K. Simmons return to the role of J. Jonah Jameson, which while it is I do appreciate him returning, but I do kind of wonder why they didn't like give him I guess the signature wig or whatever, like why they just kind of kept him bald. I thought that was an interesting choice, but his character does tie into basically what leads to Mysterio leaking Peter's identity to the world or whatever, which then leads into No Way Home. I had to think of the title for a second, which I have also done my thoughts on way back in the day because I saw it in theaters when it came out. And it was interesting that cause that's a pretty big plot point in No Way Home, but so it was kind of interesting that was like post credit scene, like not even mid credit scene, like that's straight up post credits scene or whatever, which I imagine a lot of people would probably not see. But yeah, it was a fun time. Not really sure what's next on my list. Maybe I did recently watch Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe I'll check out Guardians of the Galaxy 2 at some point. The whole a lot of the MCU I just don't really feel like I have it in me to try to tackle the whole the main sort of I guess the Thanos arc as you might call it or whatever. It seems like too much effort, so I think I'll probably take a break from a lot of the MCU stuff for a bit, and maybe check some more out some other time. If there's another Spider-Man movie, I might see that or whatever. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Far From Home. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I did enjoy both the movie and recording my thoughts right now for you all. But yeah, till next time, look it out.